Hello there. This is Metroid Dread, minimum items, no major glitches, Dread mode, which is quite a mouthful of a category, so from this point onwards I'm just going to be calling it min items or low percent dread. The idea behind the min items category is that while the game tells you that you finished with 0% if you collected no health and no upgrades to your ammo, you can actually collect even less than that. With major glitches, you can skip most of the second half of the game, but even without major glitches, there are 5 items you can skip. Pulse Radar, Spin Boost, Space Jump, Flash Shift, and Ice Missiles. Now, most of that is pretty straightforward. You can just use Bomb Jumps and Shine Sparks to get anywhere that you would normally need Flash Shift or the jump upgrades for. That's no sweat. Pulse Radar obviously isn't needed for anything at all outside of a casual playthrough, so that's an easy skip. And Ice Missiles, that's kind of an interesting one. It's a little bit more involved how we skip Ice, and skipping all 5 major upgrades with 0 health upgrades is only possible on either Rookie Mode or Normal Mode. This is Dread Mode, so we are going to need 1 additional upgrade, but I'll explain all of that in about 50 minutes when the relevant skip comes up. For now, let's talk about pseudo waves. By abusing certain animations, it's possible to get Samus in a position such that her beam shots will start inside of a wall. Beam shots only break when they approach a surface, so doing this will allow them to shoot through walls. And then for this second pseudo, we're going to be using missiles instead, and we're going to be doing what's called a seam pseudo, where essentially you start a missile in between 2 quote-unquote blocks that the world is made up of, and then, a similar sort of thing happens. It goes through the wall because it doesn't break until it actually hits the front of a surface. Anyway, these pseudos let us skip the broken enemy fight, and it lets us take a generally faster route through this intro section. The only downsides of using the pseudo wave here is that we have to fight Corpius first thing in the run without charge beam when we only have 15 missiles. Fortunately, the pseudos and Corpius both went really well in this run. Ideally, you would dump your full clip of missiles into Corpius's face to shift into phase 2, and then you unload your full clip again before breaking his tail with the standard beam in order to shift into phase 3, and then you finish him off with like 9 more missiles. I missed a few missiles, but I still had enough lenience with the way that the counts work out that I was able to finish him off in phase 3 without needing to farm for more missiles. So I like to make sure that I glance at my missile count before I come into this next room here, because, I just missile those enemies there to avoid taking damage, but if you don't have any missiles, then you have to do something a little bit different. You can either just shoot them. The first enemy you can just do a couple shots and it dies. The second one, I usually just slide underneath because it takes a lot of standard shots to kill that one, but only 1 missile. But luckily I had 2 missiles, so it was totally fine. And then we're going to be going into the first Emmy zone. Now, fun fact, the Emmys don't exist in an area until you actually do the thing that causes them to exist, which for some of them it's a cutscene. Well, it's all technically a cutscene, but the cutscene that triggers them is sometimes going through a door, sometimes it's causing something else, like the Ice Emmy is a little bit different. But for the Magnet Emmy, it's just going through a specific door, and because we did the pseudo waves to fight Corpius early, we haven't actually passed through that door. So the Magnet Emmy is not going to be a problem for us. Luckily, the Emmys aren't really that big of a deal in Dread mode, because everything kills you in 1 hit anyway, so touching an Emmy isn't really any different from touching any other enemy. And the Emmys behave very predictably. They've been studied a lot by the community. We understand how they move, and even when their cone of vision is going to register. So there's certain actions, if they're going around a corner, then they're not going to actually catch you in their vision while they're doing that. So the Emmys aren't that scary. However, it's nice regardless to not have to deal with them at all. Here I do a little wall jump trick to avoid having to press the button on the left side of that room and lower the water. It saves 5 seconds or something. And then we're going to just go on and get Charge Beam. And after Charge Beam, it's going to just be basically another round through the same area again, but this time with Charge Beam. Something that you'll notice as the run goes on is that we use the charge beam in the speed run a little bit differently than you do casually. So casually, you know, you just hold it for like 1 or 2 seconds, however long it takes, and then you release it, and that's your charge beam. In the speed run, we tend to do what's called a quick charge. So for the quick charge, basically there's a few ways to make it so that the charge beam is charged much faster. The main one that we use is a spin jump. So for some reason, just like if you are doing a spin jump while you're holding beam, it will be ready to release a full charge beam just very, very quickly. I don't really know why. And then the other big one is if the beam starts to charge and then you turn around and you release the beam as you're turning around, then you'll get a charge beam release as well. So both of those are done to do things like open doors a little bit faster, kill enemies a little bit faster, and there's a few other tricks that we will be making use of in relation to that technique, which you will see as we go on. So the only reason why we're coming this way is to press this lava switch. I kind of hate this lava switch because it means that we have to go through, I don't really like this name, but it's colloquially what the community calls the Jaffe room. And it's the most annoying room in the game because there's those enemies on the top, it's dread mode, they're very annoying to avoid. You have to go through it 3 times, and it's 3 different ways you need to navigate, because the first time you have to take the top path, the second time you have to go backwards through it, and the third time you're going to be taking the middle path. You could just take the bottom path, but it's low percent, so you have to take the hardest way through the room 3 times, basically. Which, you know, it's part of the challenge of minimum items, dread mode, so if you find this category interesting, there is a lot of depth to it that I think more runners would enjoy if they gave it a shot. Now, this section here, up till this point, my Artaria had been pretty good. I was like 10-15 seconds ahead of my previous personal best. I lost all of that time on this trick. It's called Magus Skip. Effectively, I'm trying to do this melee to the left to normalize my position so that I can do a full jump and then buffered wall jump off of the right wall, and then the melee to allow myself to respin onto the ledge. And I need to do this because it's the only way over to the right side of this room. It was very slow, but it's absolutely necessary. We go through that door, then to the left, so that we spawn the Emmy, so that we can go down and fight the central unit and kill the Emmy. If we didn't do that, and then we went and go fought the central unit, we would be soft-locked, because we would be stuck in the area with no way out, no way to get the spider magnet, no way to kill the Emmy, because the Emmy just doesn't exist until you watch that cutscene. The fight went basically fine. The central unit, you can see that I had to do a couple little jumps out of the way in order to avoid damage, but that's just dread mode. And then you saw that I intentionally jumped into that Rinka at the very end of the fight. The only reason I did that is just to kind of show off a fun little factoid that I enjoy about dread mode, which is that after you kill a boss fight, nothing hurts you. Or even if after you phase shift, like if you shoot the missile that causes Corpius to go into a second phase, and then like after the missile hits him but before the cutscene starts, you run into Corpius, you'll take knockback as though you took damage, but you just won't take damage. I was actually curious when I did previous runs of this game if those like phantom damage instances caused your total damage count in the summary screen to increment or not. You will see at the end of this run that my total damage is 0, so there's your answer. Damage, quote-unquote damage, taken after a boss fight either phase shifts or ends does not count, because you take knockback but no damage. A fun fact about dread mode is that while technically you could skip Spider Magnet in the short term on other difficulties, because you could just do a damage boost to make your way out of Artaria and into Cataris, In Dread mode, you absolutely need the spider magnet because obviously you just can't do damage boost, so there's no way to get out of Artaria without spider magnet. You need spider magnet eventually anyway, because you are eventually going to need to pull down certain platforms using spider magnet. And regardless, it would be slow to skip it and come back later. There's no reason to do that. But it is just kind of funny that you could delay spider magnet if you so chose on any category that wasn't Dread mode. In fact, I think that you actually need it in Catarus, now that I'm thinking about it. So kind of a mute point regardless, but trivia nonetheless. So while I love minimum items, I will admit, Artaria was probably less fun than some of the other categories. Artaria, you could say it's more challenging because of some of the movements that you have to do, but all in all, I think I prefer doing the damage boost, and I prefer not having to go into the room with all the enemies on the ceiling so many times. But, you know, it is what it is. At the very least, Catarus is worse. Catarus also has a damage boost. This one's like pretty much at the beginning, and we can't do it. And we're also going to have to do all of the normal annoying things about Catarus, like a certain quintuple frame perfect wall jump to save several minutes. But first we have to talk to Adam. He's going to tell us what to think. Anybody here love Adam? I think Samus loves Adam. Well, anyway, bye forever, Adam. In this room here, I shoot this first enemy and then I try to drop straight down, but I've recently started trending slightly left because I've died to that right enemy a little bit, and I slap that guy so that he won't dive at me. Otherwise, you pretty much always get hit on your way into this room to hit the lava switch, and then on your way out, you just shoot a missile very slightly up, and you'll never get hurt. I like to do a melee forward there, because sometimes it looks like such a simple shot, and it is, but like, you know, I just don't want to risk it. If it doesn't waste very much time, I'll usually prefer the safer strat, just because there's so many ways you can die, that eventually you will fall to one of them if you're not careful. Love that little, like, double jump around the magnet wall to get around the corner, and then just, like, pseudo-screw through the ply. Now, for those who don't know, you can take that top path there and go through the heated room. You have just enough health to make it through, and Dread mode does not affect damage over time from environmental damage, so that includes lava and heated rooms. However, I wanted a damageless run as well as a deathless run, so I just didn't bother with it. I took the 2-second time loss. I also got spotted by the Emmy there. But it only ever sees, like, its vision only ever goes yellow, and even if it does fully spot you, when you go through that one door that closes behind you, it will always lose sight of you instantly, even if it knows where you are and it's, like, directly behind you. It'll just instantly lose sight when you go through the door. So, that's nice. And then for this next section, it looks kind of scary because it's right there, but if you just move with confidence, it'll never spot you. I'm going to jump over this enemy here, just because I'm going to have to fight it later anyway, while I'm waiting for the magnet to come down after I hit this switch. This is also going to cause a few more enemies to spawn in, and they are actually dangerous, because you do need to just ride the magnet up. There's not like a way to cheese this, so that you don't have to wait for the magnet. I hold a pseudo-screw there, just in case the ply wants to try and play funny. And then I kill the robot with the missiles, I melee through the ply, and then I just shoot upwards to hopefully kill all of the other plies. And then I'm going to be shooting a charge beam down at that door so that it opens slow while I'm over here doing this, and then I'm going to look up at that thermal door so that it also opens while I'm doing other stuff, so I don't have to wait for it later. And then next up is the most famous trick in all of Metroid Dread, Adam Skip. If you don't like the Adam dialogues in this game, great news, we're not going to be talking to him at all from this point onward. So in this room, we need to do a very precise series of wall jumps. We want to grab that magnet on the bottom from the very bottom and then buffer 2 wall jumps. do a frame-perfect melee, respin, and then another buffered wall jump and another wall jump, and then you grab that top magnet from the very bottom. Every one of those buffers is necessary because when you buffer a wall jump as you are approaching the wall, Samus doesn't actually kick off of the wall. She kicks off of the space in front of the wall by like a few inches. And so by doing those wall jumps farther from the wall than its actual surface, you effectively shrink the size of the room in terms of like what you're wall jumping off of very slightly along the x-axis, which means that you're able to get a little bit more height overall by wall jumping back and forth like that. And that's the only reason we're able to get just barely high enough to grab that bottom magnet. I think most casual players, when they go through the game, they find that room and they're like, ooh, maybe there's a way, and they just like wall jump back and forth for a while and they never quite get it. So I think it's actually really cool that that is considered one of the biggest tricks in Metroid Dread. And if you're wondering how that results in us skipping every atom for the rest of the game when we just skipped one little loop of Catarus, let me explain. Effectively, the way the Atoms rooms work is that there is a sequence of rooms that the game expects you to go to in a particular order, and it doesn't activate one of those rooms as like a room where Adam will lock you in and force you to talk to him until you've done the previous in the sequence. So when you skip one of those rooms in the sequence, none of the other rooms for the rest of the game will activate as long as you never go back and talk to him in that first room. And that section of Catarus that we skip, we're never going to need to have to go back there for any other reason. There's no items there, not that we would be collecting items in low percent anyway. And there's like nothing else to do there. So we are able to never have to talk to Adam for the rest of the game. So we're basically done with Catarus and thereby, in my mind, done with the intro to the run. Which, if you want a little bit of insight into what went into making this run, I have to say this is kind of the most stressful part of the run for me. Not because it's particularly difficult, but because, you know, basically every category has the same Artaria and the same Catarus. Like, I talked about the few things that were different about Artaria because of it being low percent. But for the most part, it's the same. And it's really frustrating if I die at this part because, you know, doing a deathless attempt, it's like, okay, I just spent like 15 minutes of my life to get to the interesting stuff. So if I die really quickly or like really early into the interesting stuff, it's like, well, I didn't get to play anything fun and now I have to go do the intro again to do the deathless attempt. So it's honestly just kind of like a mind game that I sort of had to become zen about. I just eventually figured, like, you know what? Deathless is a difficult challenge. It will come when it comes. All I can do is make the attempts. Eventually, one of them will be the attempt that succeeds. I tried to just tell myself that every time, but I still ended up getting really annoyed whenever I died early on. So in the room coming up, there's like two enemies here. The first one, if you platform perfectly, you can just run straight past it. Unfortunately, I accidentally did a slow get up on one of the ledges, so the safest thing to do in that case is to just counter it. The second guy, I also didn't shoot the missiles fast enough, so it was another situation where I could have just killed him and kept going, but I countered just to be a little bit safe. And you see me freaking out there because I had a slightly long load speed coming into this generator room. And when you go through a room transition and you get a slightly long load, it can kind of mess up your movements because what I wanted to do there is slide through a hole and then do a respin once I was in the next room. But because I got a slightly long load, if I had not noticed that it had been a long load and then I tried to just press jump with the same timing, instead of getting a respin fall, I would have gotten a coyote jump, and the coyote jump would have caused me to grab a ledge that I don't want to grab, and that would have made me waste more time, and I hate wasting time. This is a speed run. Don't you get the concept? Sorry, that was rude. So I do a quick charge onto that door as I do a quick rise because it's a slow open door. And so I want to shoot it as early as possible. I haven't explained quick rises, have I? Okay, so quick rises, essentially when you jump into a corner, if you just tap jump, then rather than like going into Samus's like full you're grabbing a ledge animation and then doing like the little get up, you'll do like a jump off of the ledge, and so by tapping B for a really short amount of time, you'll just do a tiny little jump and you can get up onto that next ledge faster. And just doing this on every single ledge in the game, you'll save literally minutes if you do it properly throughout the entire game. So while we were in Dairon, we picked up the wide beam, and the big thing about the wide beam is that it basically just triples your damage output because it triples your beam. Like, it's literally just 3 of the same kind of beam. And what this means is that charge beam is now quite effective on a lot of enemies. It does 3 times as much damage as it did before, and it was already a pretty good item. But so like for the central unit fight, which we're about to do because we're about to try and kill off the magnet Emmy, we're going to be using something that the community calls Charlies in order to destroy it faster than using pure missiles. So a Charlie is a portmanteau of charge, beam, missile, and we make sure to do quick charges for every charge beam, and then we just like slip a missile in right after the charge beam, and that way you are shooting the missile effectively like during the like cooldown time of when your charge shot would happen, and that allows you to get in just like basically free damage during that fight and kill it a little bit faster. And then you want to come over here and just like slide under the wall and then make sure you're as close to the tunnel as possible, and as long as you just like aim at its face, then it's not going to ever get particularly close to you. So that quick kill looks pretty scary, but I promise you, if you played Metroid Dread today and just like tried to do what I do right there, you'd get it within like 1 or 2 attempts. Like, it's not as scary as it looks. If you are trying to speedrun this game and you're like a total beginner, you can just try and shoot through that tunnel from like the very entrance, like where you come out of the central unit room, and that's a little bit slower, but like basically the same. So it's basically up to you. This little section directly after the morph ball is always really annoying to me. Like, I always miss that morph into the tunnel, and then I started taking the slow way to get over that missile, because accidentally collecting an item and needing to reset to a checkpoint is the same time loss as dying. In fact, it might be actually a little bit worse. It's probably better. I think that resetting the checkpoint from the menu is probably faster than watching the death animation. But either way, to me personally, I think that needing to reset the checkpoint would kind of be the same as a death. Spiritually, it might still say it's hitless, but I don't think that it would feel like a perfect hitless run to me. And yeah, like, you could obviously do all of these sections without the safety strat and just go through it really fast, but it would take you many, many years of attempts to get that deathless, I think, because like, even if you get a risky piece of movement down to a point where you have like a 5% or a 1% chance of actually failing it, there's a lot of pieces of movement in the game, so eventually that probability is still not going to look very good for you. So here we are back in Artaria. We're going to be collecting the Varia suit while we're here. You can see that I do a little morph ball through the tunnel. That's just to make sure that I never hit those enemies there. Coming up, there's going to be a little trick that I like a lot. Essentially, whenever you are holding a fully charged charge beam and then you morph, you will release the charge beam, which allows you to do stuff like that, where you morph directly into the hole and also open the door. That's just a little bit faster than going through the hole, then doing a quick charge to open the door, because the quick charge, while it is fast, it is still slower than just running straight through that door. So this is the Varia escape sequence. It's not very long or complicated. You just kind of need to know where the flames are and then not run into them. This last section is a little bit trickier, but all you have to do really is just stop in the middle of that tunnel so that you don't auto-unmorph when you go out of the tunnel, and then you just roll underneath the flames and jump over the very last flame. It looks a lot scarier than it is. As long as you know the thing to do, which is just exactly what I did there, then you'll never die. So the Varia suit is why I say most people would probably have a better time running low percent hard rather than low percent dread. Low percent hard in its hardest sections is not actually that much easier than low percent dread. But the thing is, low percent dread has a perfectly horizontal difficulty curve. Like, it starts at, let's say, like a 9, and it never goes down or up, really. Maybe a little bit for the boss fights, but like overall it stays at about the same difficulty the entire time, because everywhere you go during the game, if you run into an enemy, you will die. On hard mode, that gets to be the case once you go a certain amount of way into the game. But then when you get the suit upgrades, that actually stops being the case. So like in Cataris and Dairon, every enemy will, or not Cataris, but definitely Dairon, every enemy will kill you with contact damage when you have the power suit. But once you have the Varia suit, your damage is reduced, and now suddenly you actually can survive contact damage with a lot of enemies. And so there's kind of like a careful sort of like ebb and flow to the difficulty curve, where like your rewards feel meaningful. Whereas in Dread mode, I pretty much just get Varia suit so that I can go into the heated area. Like, technically that's the only reason why I would get it in a low percent run for hard mode, but it doesn't feel quite so meaningless because it does actually have an effect on the way you navigate the world in low percent hard. So it might make it sound like I don't like low percent dread, which is a weird thing for someone who just did it hitless to say, but I promise I did have a good time in the making of this speedrun. So let's talk about the Kraid fight. The Kraid fight in this run went really well and then kind of fell apart at the end, but we survived at the end. So for this beginning section, he actually takes half damage, so that's why I'm only doing charge shots. But then after he kind of goes out of that passivity phase, he does take full damage, so that's when I start doing Charlies. And I'm just going to be finishing him up, and then in phase 2, I'm going to be doing what's called a single wall jump, where you gain arbitrary amounts of height off of a single wall by morphing in between each jump and holding neutral, so that you don't push too far away from the wall. And then that lets you get up to the magnet without needing to either shoot his belly or wait for the right attack. However, unfortunately, I actually did a bad jump much too early during this punch here, so I actually fell off of the magnet, and that made it so that I fell down. I didn't think he was close enough to death where I would have felt comfortable doing the thing where you wall jump off of the wall and then like do a charge shot up to open his mouth and then do it again to just do a little bit more damage, which turned out to be the right call, because that was like 8 missiles that I had to shoot there to kill him. I could have just done another single wall jump attempt, but I was a little bit, like, shaken by having fell, and I'm aware of my own mental limitations, where if I get, like, annoyed or upset by something, then my execution skill just drops quite dramatically, and so I try to retreat into a safety strat whenever that happens, and so in that case, that just meant shooting the belly, which was a bit of a time loss, but I think I died on Kraid in my previous run, so it was still, overall, a fairly decent fight. And now I have the diffusion beam. So the diffusion beam doesn't really have much impact for us in the game, but we do still need it for something much later. I don't remember exactly what, but I'm sure I'll remember when we get there. So this next little section of the game is basically a scavenger hunt for a few items. We're going to be getting, first off, grapple beam. We're going to be getting it pretty early. This is an intended sequence break. We're going to be using something called a coyote jump, which is named after Wile E. Coyote, the cartoon character who would often jump, run off of a cliff and then not notice for a few seconds. So before he noticed, he would look down, and it's like he was standing on solid ground until he noticed. And in that same way, we're able to slide off of a ledge and then jump as though from solid ground for about a second. Maybe not quite that extreme, maybe like a half second, but a pretty long time after. And so by doing that, we're able to get into places that we aren't normally able to get to. But this is definitely an intended mechanic, because prior to this game's release and a little bit after, there was a series of articles that Nintendo put out on their website called the Dread Report. And the very last one they put out talked about coyote jumps under their official name, slide jumps. So if you have any uncles that work at Nintendo and you want to, show interest in their job, talk about how you've mastered slide jumping in Metroid Dread. Their eyes will light up and they'll finally love you. But yeah, so in this section, there's not really a whole lot to talk about. We are going to go down through a little bit of a zigzag area, and by just carefully weaving in Morph Ball form, we'll be able to avoid getting knocked on any of the floors, thereby making us not have to reset our fall speed and get to the bottom a little bit faster. And we also want to be in Morph Ball form because Morph Ball gets to its maximum downward velocity faster than Samus does when she's in, you know, her normal human form. And the thing that's really cool about the grapple beam in this game is that you can grapple to magnets, so you can do a lot of fancy stuff. And there's also a little technique that you saw me do there called a grapple cancel. And it has basically the same mechanic effect as a slide jump, where if you are grappling towards a surface and then you stop grappling, you're able to jump from midair. And so we make a little bit less use of that than we do out of slide jumping, but it is still a technique that pops up every once in a while. So keep your eyes out for that. So the next big thing that we have to do is go to get the bomb, and to get there we're going to have to go backwards through the big room in Dairon that we did the slide jumps in. This time we don't have to do any slide jumps, we just go down onto that ledge, or onto that slope, and then jump over to the ledge, and then we're going to grab this ledge on the left, do a big jump to the side, and make our way on. Technically you can jump into that lava if you want. There's a few little tiny mini dips into the lava that you could do to save a bit of time in this game, but I wanted the cool 0 damage taken in addition to 0 times defeated in my final result screen, so I chose to just go the long way around. Unfortunately, I also got, like, you know, I got the yellow alert from the yellow Emmy here, so it kind of ended up patrolling this area that I was trying to get through for a really long time. And eventually I thought it was far enough away, but then it caught me here. Luckily, I got the counter. That was just pure luck. I didn't have any, like, my reaction time's not good. I just got lucky there. Or the other way you could look at it is that I was blessed, and then I messed up the coyote jump in the very next room. But I decided to just go back rather than try and navigate the room without the coyote jump, because the enemies are just so much harder to avoid if you don't get that little coyote jump out of the tunnel. And anyway, after that, there's some fancy things you can do in this dark room. Like, you could just, in this room here, like that little blob to the side, you can do a missile seam pseudo to shoot it from the other room over to break it. Or you can do a pseudo wave at the very top of the big room to the left of this room in order to get into it a little bit faster. But I didn't want to do either of those because I was so shaken from having almost died to the yellow Emmy and then almost died in like the room directly after the yellow Emmy. So I was scared. I was shaken. I got bomb. I'm not dead. That's all I cared about. It's a race, but it's like tortoise in the hare almost, you know? I just gotta make sure I'm steady and not making any horrible mistakes. So if you're like a hardcore Metroid player, you probably know about infinite bomb jumps, where you use laying bombs at a very specific timing to get infinite height. That is more of a backup strat than anything in this speedrun, because, you know, laying one bomb then another, and then you're laying like da-da, and then doing it like that over and over again to get up to a very high place. It's pretty slow. You can usually get a Shine Spark or something similar instead. So that is the one thing I don't 100% love about this category, is that whenever you do infinite bomb jump, it kind of feels like a punishment for making a mistake. When infinite bomb jumps, on a casual or like semi-casual level, I guess, to me personally, it's the coolest trick that Metroid has ever had. But still, I recommend practicing your infinite bomb jumps regardless, because like I said, it is a backup strat for some Shine Sparks, and if you're not good at single wall jumps with the Morph Ball, you can use it even more in this category. So definitely a skill worth learning before you take the deep dive into minimum items, if you ask me. Because, you know, at the end of the day, you don't have space jump, and that is going to limit you, and it is nice to have options. So this is Berenia, the water area. It sucks. We're going to be taking the top tram in, effectively just so that we can race down to the bottom tram and leave instantly, because that's how we get to the speed booster Emmy arena. Along the way, there is a potential upgrade which we could get, Flash Shift, but this is the first part of the run where minimum items distinguishes itself from 0% for no major glitches. The technique that we're going to be using to skip Flash Shift is the exact same technique that is used to get Flash Shift a little bit faster. So if you are familiar with any speedrun of this game that does collect Flash Shift and you know about backdoor Flash Shift, it's the same exact idea. We're just going to be using it on the shutter above Flash Shift rather than the shutter into Flash Shift. So we're going to be laying bombs in basically like a 150 BPM rhythm, back and forth, and then that just allows us to stay above the pressure plate for long enough that the door reopens and we can get through. There is one other pressure plate that is a little bit tricky to skip, but every other pressure plate in the game, except for the one going into Flash Shift and that one skipping Flash Shift and then one other gate, you can just do a full jump with Morph Ball and you will skip it. So it's only really difficult for two gates that we're going to be going through. Here I did a couple pseudo waves to break some blobs at the bottom to lower the water so that I could continue. Unfortunately, I messed up the diagonal water bomb jump to get over to the other side, and I think it's slower to do a second attempt at it, so I just went ahead and went around. If I'm wrong, then whatever, I wasted like a second. Probably something I should look up at some point to know which is the better backup strat. Regardless, we're on our way to the Speed Booster Emmy Arena. Something that I find really fun about this route is that it is quite different from the rest of the routes, not just in terms of like which order you do things and like which tricks you do, but the fundamental way you get around is different without Flash Shift. You're going to be making more use of Speed Booster, you're going to be making more use of single wall jumps, and you're going to be making more use of just having a really, really hard time in boss fights that are trivially easy if you have Flash Shift. So it's a fun time. Definitely harder, but very fun. So for this first little section here, I just do some water movement. I don't try to go too fast, because if you go a little bit too fast, you can actually force the water Emmy to go to the right and like intercept you. So you go a little bit slow on purpose. Here we do a single wall jump in order to get up to this ledge. If you had Flash Shift, then you would just do a normal wall jump and then Flash Shift backwards. And that is the first of several little tiny movements in this game, as well as some just like bigger movements later that are different because we don't have Flash Shift. And yeah, the central unit fight is pretty much the same as it was for the Morph Emmy. The Emmy quick kill is a little bit different. We're going to get onto this platform here and try our best to shoot the Speed Emmy as it's coming out of the hole. I missed quite a few shots, so it might have actually been faster to let it walk a little bit forward, because then you would be pulled to the ground during this cutscene rather than over to the left platform. But I wasn't quite sure, and I was at sort of a weird angle because I stepped farther forward than I had initially meant to. So it is what it is. Point is, we get Speed Booster. It's a pretty cool item. It boosts your speed. Makes you go fast. Unfortunately, it's controlled by a stick click. So I use a custom, not custom, but like a third-party controller that has buttons on the back of the controller, and you can remap whatever you want to those back buttons. For the first half of the game, I like to use melee, and you can see that I did an accidental melee there because it was still mapped to melee. I like to remap it to Speed Booster for the second half of the game, just so that I'm not like putting unnecessary pressure on the analog stick, because that makes it a little bit easier for it to develop drift. So the back buttons just kind of like save the integrity of the stick. And so there's another single wall jump to get up to an area that you normally wouldn't fun time. And we're going to be making our way over to the Frenia elevator. We're going to be talking to Quiet Robe so that we can make our way to Berenia. Berenia, that's the one. This boss fight, I think, is one of the first ones where I really fear having to reset. Like, Kraid, you can die to Kraid. It's not like Kraid is trivially easy, but this next one's real hard. I really hope the Switch 2 is backwards compatible, just so we don't have to sit through these load screens as much in the future of speedrunning Metroid Dread. Like, if Metroid Dread had instant loads, I think it would be a perfect game. As is, it's just one of my favorites of all time, I guess. So we're going to do a single wall jump off of this wall just because it's slightly faster than doing the grapple, and then, like I said, you can just do a full jump with the morph ball to get over most of the pressure plate gates, but this one coming up here, it has like a little lowered ceiling, so we're not actually able to do that. We're going to need to Shine Spark over it. And then here's the somewhat tough boss fight that I was referring to. It's the robot. If you're doing like normal person mode, like non-dread mode, it's not actually that scary because you just kind of like do whatever you want. But you know, you kind of have that lingering threat of like if you get touched at all, you die. I think that's even true in normal and hard mode, low percent. Maybe not rookie. I'm not sure. I'd have to check again. But ideally, you want to just kind of like lead it on to that left platform and then jump over it. Don't jump over too fast, though, because if you jump over it too fast, it won't actually do an attack. It will just jump down to chase you, and then you might die. So that's scary. But yeah, 2 Shine Sparks will kill it. I messed up the charge a couple times, but luckily I've faced the Chozo Robo so many times at this point that I can... I'm just so familiar with its attack patterns. Like, honestly, none of its attacks are like hard to avoid. You just have to know what to do. So essentially, anytime it does a projectile attack, all you have to do is walk away from it a little bit, and then once it actually fires, you do a full height jump towards it. And if it does a melee attack, then you just run towards it and do a full height jump over it. It's that simple. There is a manipulation you can do by sliding under the charge shot, but it's a little scary, and for that fight specifically, for the quick kill, you just want to Shine Spark it twice, so don't worry about it. The manipulation would allow you to get a counter attack, but like I said, don't worry about it. We do use it for the Gold Chozo fight, or Gold Robo fight coming up, though. Here's a nice little speed keep that I like a lot. We're going to jump at a very specific point on that tiny platform and then do a wall jump, a very specific point to keep the speed for a little bit longer. Very fun. And we kill that guy. Kill that guy. And then I like this movement a lot. You just kind of slide under here so that you store there, and then you do a full height quick rise so that you're high enough that you can just do a Shine Spark directly to the left to splat that guy on the side of the room. Very fun. That morph there, by the way, that wasn't like faster or anything. I just get really impatient during the parts of the game where it's like just walk to the left until you get to the platform or whatever. So I like to just find my ways of kind of fidgeting that don't actually affect the speed of the playthrough at all. So morphing with speed and running with speed, and I think even jumping with speed, they're all the same height. So that's my little thing I like to do. So we're going to be doing some fun speed boosts in this next little section. The first thing is just, you know, basically a very small speed boost directly to the left just because we don't have flash shift. But then after I almost go the wrong way, we're going to come up here and charge a speed boost on that tunnel, and then do a morph off of a slide off of the ledge to keep our speed all the way up here. Technically you can keep your speed even further, but it's quite difficult, and I can't do it. Anyway, we're gonna just do a Shine Spark through this room so that we don't have to deal with this laser. Unfortunately, this laser guy we are gonna have to deal with, but it's as easy as just ripping his faceplate off and then doing a counter when he tries to kill you. And we're not going to be fighting Dragaiga because we have a faster way to get through this area. We're just going to do 2 turnaround pseudo waves, and that allows us to get into this room. I use cloaks to make sure that I think they're called Dizzians, whatever, the guys that shoot in 8 directions, I make sure that they don't spot me by using Phantom Cloak. And I make sure to uncloak before I do the 3rd grapple beam, because that would cause me to take damage. Technically, it wouldn't kill me because damage over time doesn't kill you in Metroid Dread, in Dread mode, but you know, I still want that sweet 0 damage taken, as I said. So this next fight coming up is one of the more difficult ones in Dread mode, especially because you don't have flash shift. If you have flash shift, you can kind of just, you know, zip around and not really ever have to worry about anything. But killing him fast and safely is a little bit difficult here. I'm going to try and do a certain manipulation. So I go over to the right side, or to the left side rather, do a couple missiles, and then run over to the right, and then he's going to come over here. He does whatever attack he's going to do, but ideally, if I caused him to do this little runaround, he'll always do the charge beam there, and if you slide under the charge beam, he will always do a counterable attack afterwards, which means that you can get a missile refill, and then you can just finish killing him off. And when he dies, he drops so many power-ups that at 0%, like in this low percent category, you're always going to get a full refill pretty much, so it works out really well. From this point onward, I don't really think that there's a particularly difficult boss fight for a while, so that's a nice little section to get through. Once I get through the gold Robo, I kind of feel like I'm good for the next little while, because there's also not that many environmental risks. It's basically just like, you know how the enemies act and then just act accordingly. Like that guy, that little spider in that previous room, he always lunges at you as soon as you drop down, so just do a little drop down, wait like a beat, and then jump over him. To me, Super Missile marks the end of a rather stressful period of the game. Super Missile doesn't really change much about how you navigate through the world, but this next little section is just very easy. Like, as long as you run forward, these little guys with a tongue will never get you. And then in the next area, in this next room, you have to grapple up, and there's all these enemies in the way, so you just do your diffusion beam. Sometimes one will kill them all, sometimes you have to do 2, it just depends. And then in the next room, we make use of a relatively little-known feature of Metroid Dread, which is that if you do a pseudo-screw on very small enemies, they actually won't break the pseudo-screw, and so you can just jump through all of them as though you had the actual screw attack. That's useful even on non-Dread mode in a lot of areas, because there's a lot of like little clusters of enemies that, like, if you could just jump through them, then that makes the room really easy. So not having to worry about like the diffusion beam pad or anything is nice. So this is a loon. It's a pretty simple area, it's pretty small. We're basically just coming in, getting plasma beam, and leaving, but doing so marks a shift in the story. We're going to be freeing the X, which does have some actual consequences beyond the story, but I'll explain that in a little bit. For this little section here, I try to lay a bomb and then do a slide morph into the bomb so that I drop faster. I do one shot and then a charge beam to break that blob, because a charge beam will, I think always, this might not be true of every blob, but for most blobs, a charge beam will destroy it as long as it's taken any damage at all. And for here, I charge a Shine Spark so that I can just break through that zombie. Then I jump over this guy. Technically, you can jump over this zombie, but it's quite tight, and you know, you only lose like a second or 2 by just waiting for it to give you the counter. So, you know, better safe than sorry. A death costs you a lot more time than 1 or 2 seconds, let me tell you that. This is the Plasma Beam. It is a flat damage upgrade and also allows us to damage more enemies, including some bosses, with beam spam as opposed to needing to use missiles or whatever. It's probably the main reason why we had to legalize turbo for this game, because beam spam becomes the optimal damage output for a lot of boss fights. I personally use a turbo controller because the alternative is to mash. Mashing hurts my hands, and don't tell me that there's some secret mashing method that is actually perfectly healthy. I don't want to hear it. I've tried them all. They're not comfortable for me, so I prefer to use a turbo controller. And the community placed some restrictions on turbo controllers, Some might argue too many restrictions, some might argue not enough. I don't really give a shit. I just want to play the game, man. I realized that rant kind of went over the entire boss fight, but don't worry. There are 4 Chozo Warrior fights in this game, 5 if you count Raven Beak. That first one is really basic. There's not really much more to it than what you saw. Just hit him as much as you can, avoid the attacks. I like this Shine Spark here. You press R while holding a charge beam in your hand while doing the Shine Spark, and that will release the charge beam so that you can open a door to continue your Shine Spark for longer. And then you can press it again while you're in the recoil animation to open that door faster as well. I'm not really quite sure why that is possible, because like they did a pretty good job of locking out all of your potential movements during Shine Spark, but R will always release your charge shot even during this like, you know, uninterruptible move of Samus's. It's probably a coding error, but it's the best coding error of all time, if you ask me. So in this next section, we're going to be doing a very long speed keep. Not only is this fast, but it allows us to rip through all of the enemies on the way to the ice semi zone rather than needing to avoid them or fight them on even footing. So while this looks a bit scary, it is actually the much safer option. The ice Emmy spawned very high up in this first room, which is great for me because it allows me to keep my speed all the way through the room. There is a lower spawn that can happen, which does cause more issues because you can't keep your speed the whole way through. You have to do like a weird little like hide-and-seek game. So luckily, we got the good spawn. In the second ice Emmy section coming up, I listen for the Emmy's beeps as I enter. If I don't hear any beeps, that means that the Emmy is in the middle of this room, and I haven't figured out a good way to cross the room with that Emmy spawn, and getting frozen is an instant death on Dread mode. So I would have reloaded the Emmy zone if I didn't hear that beep. But I did hear the beep, so I was able to safely plow through. All that taken care of, we go on to pick up our next upgrade. If this was Rookie or Normal mode, we would go straight to Berenia and do some damage boosts to get Gravity Suit. But in Dread mode, we don't have that option, obviously, so we need to either get Ice Missiles or Spin Boost. Ice lets you take a shorter trip to Gravity Suit and gives you a better damage output in the late game, while Spin Boost lets you skip 2 boss fights and gives you better movement in the late game. So personally, my main goal was just getting through this category Deathless, so I really value the movement versatility that Spin Boost grants you, and it's only about a minute's deficit compared to Ice Route. Here's a fun little strat. You can do a Spin Boost underwater into the corner of a ceiling to get some extra height, and this slope is basically treated like one big corner. The reason why this works is that the game doesn't want you getting trapped on corners, and so it tries to move you to where you quote-unquote wanted to be if you just barely graze a corner. This has all been known for a while, but the water bomb jump on Morph Respin to get even more height is my contribution, so, you know, just saying. Like, you can get that ledge without the spin boost, don't get me wrong, but the consistency is a lot better with the water bomb jump than without it. And the consistency is important because the other way of getting to Berenia is several minutes slower than taking this green teleportal. While we can't take the speed booster route to Gravity Suit without Ice Missiles because there are a bunch of Enkis in the way, going to Green Teleportal lets us start below Flash Shift rather than above Dragaiga. That's right, we skip the entire dry half of Berenia and get right into the wet stuff. We make some use of the Grapple Beam to get around, underwater a little bit faster, as well as a small Morph Ball boost to get to the Magna faster. And then we do a Water Bomb jump to get to this Plasma Door, which is the only reason, by the way, that Ice Skip isn't viable for glitchless low percent runs. If you ask me, that's an absolute shame, because I think that keeping Super Missiles for the whole game is really cool. Like, I like the sound effects that they do a lot. Like, it's definitely cooler than Ice. Anyway, so all of the enemies here are really annoying. Like, they all just, like... I feel like it's just so easy to accidentally bump into one of these guys. Like, you can technically get through that door without getting hit, but it's, like, kind of tight. If you don't get the Morph Ball boost perfect, then it just doesn't work. Then this Sakai is going to attack us while we are trying to clear a way to jump deeper into Berenia, so we have to kill it first. The X will always reform into another enemy, but luckily that takes long enough that we can break the grapple while that happens. Then we counter, kill the red Enki on the other side of the gap before they attack us, and then use Spin Boost to make it over. This Depth Thorn here looks really scary, but if you just do a Morph Ball booster on the corner, it will never hit you. And then you just make sure that you kill every single one of the red Enki down there, though, because I've had like 3 runs that were deathless up to Berenia that were ruined just because diffusion beam randomly decided to miss 1 or 2 of them. So I just, kill them. I just shoot the standard beam until they're all dead. I don't bother with diffusion. So then we come down here to break this blob, and I have to kill the Dizzians while I'm at it. Technically, you can survive a hit from them on hard... Wait, I'm talking about dread mode. What am I talking about? So yeah, you just have to kill them all because it's dread mode. On hard mode, you can survive 1 hit, but sometimes you get double hit, so I do it on that difficulty as well. Anyway, this is the last room that on the lower difficulties we do a damage boost for, but again, because we have spin boost, we're just going to kill the enemy and then grab this ledge and do a spin boost over. And I'm going to start charging Speed Booster as I do a slow rise from that ledge, which lets me get speed before going into the next room. Unfortunately, you can't Shine Spark while invisible, but it's a fun way to splat this Rodamathon X before the Nail Lugger forms in the middle of the room to ruin my life. After that, we just kill the red Enki so they don't bother us while we get into the corner to do some turnaround pseudos to open the path to the top of the area. The way I find my angles for the pseudo here is that I basically hold my control stick at 45 degrees or so, and then I roll it down until the menu stops scrolling. It's not too picky of an angle, all things considered, but I always appreciate having something tangible to look for, like when I looked at Samus's feet earlier. And, just like all the pseudos in Berenia, they're like surprisingly nice, very lenient. So we're just going to be, breaking these blobs and then pulling the thing, which I think is the only reason why we technically need grapple. No, wait, that's not right. No, this is the only reason why we need diffusion, is because one of those blobs is unbreakable without diffusion. There's no way to, like, pseudo it or whatever. So, the fact that we need gravity is the only reason we need diffusion, even in no major glitches. Anyway, so since we don't have Space Jump, we're going to need to do a Shine Spark out of this huge pit at the bottom of Berenia. Luckily, it's a fairly straightforward one. If you store after the drop, you'll always be in the perfect position to grab this ledge here, which gives you a fine way of dodging this spit clock. The gas does almost no damage. Like, even on hard mode, you would be fine to take 1 tick, but unfortunately on dread mode, it just kills you instantly. But afterwards, we just do a little speed keep. We make sure to go into Morph Ball form before we do that jump, because otherwise you would bonk your head on the ceiling and not be able to make it all the way to the elevator. And then this next cutscene is genuinely, I think, the hardest cutscene in the entire game to remember to skip. But afterwards, I like to charge Speed Booster and slide into the flipper. I don't think I got it on this run, because ideally what you want to do, you'll see what I'm talking about in a second, but like you want to like look down as you're falling so that the like enemies that are in this little tunnel coming up are not in the position where they're gonna like kill you. But because I messed this whole thing up, I basically just have to like wait for them to pop up so that I can kill them with the plasma beam. Anyway, the first real point of danger in Frozen Artaria here is the Chozo fight, the red Chozo fight. Luckily, we skip the first phase by just taking a Shine Spark at the very start, and then we just spam beam. Whenever he forces me to jump over him to dodge an attack, I like to try and get a quick charge so that I can do a Charlie and then just do more beam spam. When he jumps onto the wall to do his spit attack, I just keep firing and then take a few steps forward or slide or whatever whenever he spits to dodge. And then he never gets a chance to do a second spit. Like, he doesn't have that much HP as long as you get the Shine Spark at the start. So right after the fight, there's a bunch of Speed Booster garbage to get to Cataris. I store a Spark in that room so that I can drop down and refresh Speed Booster on the slope. Pretty much every enemy here can kill you, so this is just a way of making sure I keep Speed Booster active while I rush through everything without wreaking damage. This is honestly one of my least practiced sections of the game, all things considered. Like, if you look at top-level all bosses runs, they keep Speed Booster through basically all of Frozen Artaria. I opt for more simple speed boosts that aren't, like, particularly safer or anything, but, you know, there's always something to work on in this game. I don't know what to say. Fortunately, I was able to get the climb speed keep and use it to get up here without needing to kill that spit clock and do a really slow bomb jump. Next, we avoid this pit that the game thinks is full of ice so that we don't die from quote-unquote going out of bounds. And we kill everything here. We start another speed booster. I aim up to avoid bonking into this Kaleida early, and then I do a slide jump over this gap to keep speed, then store. Platform up here, and Shine Spark over the missile in this door. That's the most stressful part of Frozen Artaria, in my opinion, because if you accidentally die to any enemy throughout, or if you accidentally touch that missile, you have to go all the way back to when you fight the red Chozo. And, you know, obviously I'm going for Deathless, so, like, any death would be disqualifying, but even if you're just going for, like, a personal best of any kind, that part is just so annoying. But after that, we just go over, and then we do a couple of short speed boosts to get to the Caterpillar elevator. Now, I would like to take a moment to deliver my manifesto about glitch categorization in Metroid Dread. Here it goes. Thank God axis skew is banned in no major glitches. I understand that people think that major glitches would be more cleanly defined as, like, no out of bounds or whatever, if that could be the rule set, but I'm so glad axis skew is banned in no major glitches, because Experiment Z57 is the coolest boss fight in minimum items, if you ask me. I like to think that every speedrun category has, like, some key moment that the whole run is built around. It, like, you know, like, if it's a good category, there's, like, some point that you look at and you're like, okay, yeah, check this shit out, though. Like, this is why we did it. Look at this stuff that we have, like, look at the monster I have made through my decisions in the speedrun. And for min items, that is the Z57 fight. There's a glitch that you can do in Unrestricted to skew your axis, which lets you get speed and store a Shine Spark right at the start of the fight, and Z57 is hard-coded to be one-shot by a Shine Spark. And that's a neat party trick, but I would have almost no interest in min items if we didn't need to actually fight Z57 with no health, no ammo, no flash shift. I want to earn that spark. We don't have any missiles, so we need to use Charlie's to get as much damage as possible. We can't survive any hits at all. Even in, like, the lower difficulties, we can't survive any direct hit, and we can only survive, I think, like, 1 or 2, depending on the difficulty, ticks of damage from the floor goop. So we have to avoid all of that without flash shift. And then once we finish off phase 1, we need to break these claws, which takes 2 charge shots each. This is pretty scary, because you have to break all 4, and it's a fairly tight window, but I did get it. On the ice route, this last section is extremely hard, but with spin boost we can do we can do more or less the same Flappy Bird strat that we normally do, where we just, like, land in between every double jump. And then we store a Shine Spark, and we close out the fight. Like, that's what it's all about, baby! After we kill Experiment Z57, the area goes back to normal, which means that there's, like, a ton of enemies. There's actually a little bit more. There's actually a few more enemies than there are normally because of the X being freed, I believe. And I kind of just had a little bit of a brain fart there. You're supposed to do a speed booster through basically this entire section, but I didn't restore on the slope for just, you know, mental failure reasons. But anyway, we make our way up to the blue teleportal to go over to where Screw Attack is, and with Screw Attack we're going to be able to make our way into the end game to collect the last few items. I also really like when you get Screw Attack in the game, because it kind of marks the beginning of the definitive end game to me, because you're at a point where the traversal between areas is no longer any real threat to you, because with Screw Attack you just kind of, like, you know, turn everything into paste by just jumping into them. But this next little stretch of boss fights, with the exception of SQ, they're all really, really hard. They either have a pretty stressful sort of speed strat, or there's just a very high chance that you die to them if you just mess up in one very specific way. Ironically, you could use Screw Attack in both of the twin Robo fights coming up, in order to finish them off in, like, the last little bit of their health pretty quickly. But if you do it too early, then you just die. And you could also use it against SQs, Core X. You'll see what happens with SQ when we get there. It's a little bit stressful, because the Screw Attack, just some enemies give you recoil damage and some of them don't. So whenever they do give you recoil damage, you need to make sure that if you are going to screw attack them, that's the attack that kills them, because otherwise you're going to die on Dread mode. So next up we're going to be doing a speed keep up to the twin Robo arena. It involves breaking some screw attack blocks in very close proximity to a missile plus tank, so you have to be a little bit careful to avoid it, but aside from that, it's not too difficult. You just make sure you do your max height spin jumps, and it's basically free. The twin Robo fight itself can be very tricky, but I've labbed it out to be fairly consistent. I start the fight by walking into the center of this platform, then I jump over the top Robo when he starts charging his attack. I use Morph Ball to dodge the shots from below, then I keep shooting the top Robo. I got a favorable attack pattern that keeps the bottom Robo out of the fight for a while, so by the time it enters the fray again, the top Robo is donezo. Once you get this fight down to a 1v1, you're gonna win. You have the mobility, you have the space. It's like getting into a chess endgame with 2 rooks and a queen. Like, as long as you play like a player with a brain, you're gonna win. You'd have to fall asleep to lose. I swear. It really is that simple. Like, just don't fall asleep at the wheel. So next up is Golzuna, who is the last real run killer before Beak. In most categories, getting 4 Shine Sparks is like a nice time saver, but in mid items, it's pretty much a requirement. Without Flash Shift, there are attacks that are completely impossible to dodge, and the attacks are random, so our goal is to simply kill Golzuna before he gets a chance to do anything. This is pretty dang hard, and also somewhat up to chance, but recently, Lucina4747 helped me lab out a method to kill Golzuna with 100% consistency, as long as you have the spin boost, which luckily this route of minimum items has. So we're going to be seeing that. I'm very excited to show it off. I call it the Lucy Spark for obvious reasons. So we speed boost into the arena, then we shoot this Musby to death. I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. When I see the X reveal its color, I store a Shine Spark on this side of the Goliath, then spark through, do a full jump to normalize when I start running, store on the wall, morph, Ball Spark, Golzuna's Bush, then I'm going to do the Lucy Spark, where I wall jump off of the right side of the arena to get over Golzuna with Spin Boost, Store, and Spark. The Core X is easy to just shoot out of the way and then do one last Shine Spark. And that is the fight. Aside from a slightly slow Goliath kill, the fight is perfect. I am so happy that Golzuna is consistent. I laid those 4 bombs before I picked up the Core X, by the way, because the cross bomb in this game is programmed not in the way that I assume they intended it to function. And so sometimes you'll be holding R and you press Y and like that's the combo. Like if you're in Morph Ball, you think that's the combo. That's what they tell you to do to get the cross bomb to come out. And then you just get normal bomb. And the way it's been explained to me is that essentially the game doesn't have a check to see, like, is there a cross bomb currently active? It checks how long has it been since a cross bomb has been laid, and then it allows you to lay a cross bomb if that timer has, like, expired. And so something to do with, like, laying a normal bomb changes how that interacts. I don't know. Ask Arcanox about it for the technical details. The point is, laying those bombs makes the cross bomb behave more consistently in the very next room, and so that's why I do it. Here I do a long Shine Spark by using R-Shot to open one door mid-spark and the next door mid-recoil. Then I counter that zombie rather than using Screw Attack, because sometimes it attacks you just a little bit faster and you just die. The counter is slower, but it makes you always survive. Then I Screw Attack that block to come down here, kill this guy, and do a slide, double turnaround pseudo wave with the grapple beam, which lets you grab the grapple block from the wrong side and destroy it, which is just like a small time save for pretty much every glitch category. And then we're going to Ferenia, the area with like a lot of stuff to do. God, it feels like so much. There's 3, technically 4 boss fights that we have to do in Ferenia. We're only going to get 2 items though. Storm Missiles and Wave Beam. And we only need those because we need Power Bombs. So, you know, all strictly necessary items. This section coming up with the wave Emu zone, you're supposed to keep your speed basically all the way through it, but you're going to see that I messed up. It's not even really a technical flaw. My brain just gave me wrong information and I just did entirely the wrong thing. Because, like, okay, you slide down here, you stall on this wall, that's alright, but you're not supposed to store here, you're not supposed to shine spark here, and then you're certainly, if you do all that, you're not supposed to not cloak. Luckily, if you get spotted while the wave Emu is pretty far away, it's gonna get bored before it catches you, as long as you just hug the wave Emu door. So, it's not a huge deal or anything, but it was a little scary. And that cloak, I don't think, meant anything. It was just kind of a fear response on my part. The nice thing about doing SQ last in terms of the unique late-game bosses is that we get to go through this whole section of Phrenia being basically invincible. Like, we have Gravity Suit, so we can just rush through the Emu zones. We don't need to worry about the water. And we have Screw Attack, so none of the enemies around here actually pose any threat to us. We can just rip through everything. And it's kind of nice having this period of lower tension after going through the stress of Ice Skip into Frozen Artaria, into Z57, into Twin Robos, into Golzuna. The other nice thing about doing SQ this late is that we have Screw Attack. All we need to do for this fight is Shine Spark for half of its health and then Screw Attack until the Core X shows itself. Ideally you would do 3 Charlies or 2 Charlies and a Screw Attack to kill the Core X, but I messed up the Charlies so it survived for 4 attacks instead of 3. If I didn't pick up any of the X it dropped, it might have left me with 11 missiles, which makes the first Storm Gate quite annoying, since you have to do some cheese in order to get past any Storm Gate with less than 15 missiles, and very annoying cheese if you have less than 12. But luckily we have 15, so we're not going to need to stop and kill any enemies on the way here. We're able to just kind of run on through. And I'm holding R the whole time I'm rolling here so that I start charging Storm Missiles as soon as I come out of the gate so that I can lock on to the Storm Gate locks as quickly as possible and make my way into the Emu zone once again. I also make sure that I'm holding R as I go through this room so that when I go into the next room, I'm already searching for Storm Missile lock targets when I walk into the next room so that I can open the Storm Gate instantly. After that, I counter this zombie to refill on missiles and start speed boosting into the boss room. I store Spark on this left platform, dump some Storm Missiles into the gold Robo, Shine Spark him too, get some beam spam damage on both Robos, retreat to avoid the silver Robo's attacks, finish off the gold Robo, and then start charging Storm Missiles on the top platform to dump more into the silver Robo. Then I just dodge another attack, and we do a couple more Storm Locks to finish him off. I doubled back very quickly because I realized that I don't want to have to do any annoying cheese strats to get through the Storm Gate, and you can be very unlucky with the missile drops in this next area. By the way, there's a speed boost that you are able to do here where you kind of just like get your speed right as you hit that right wall on the floor, and then you just do a couple wall jumps, and then you end up exactly where you are supposed to lay that cross bomb. I think I just pressed the speed boost button a little bit too early, like a couple frames early, when I got onto that ledge, so unfortunately it didn't happen, but that's okay, because you're not really ever in any danger of dying in this section anyway, just because, like, you're jumping around so much and everything in this area will die to Screw Attack. I use cross bombs to get up this shaft, which is very much not the fastest way to do it, but I find the wall jumps here very annoying. Not so much because they're particularly difficult, but because if you do mess them up, then you might die to the wave enemy. Luckily, sparking the central unit's armor, then screw attacking the brain is pretty much as fast as that gets, and it's brain dead easy. But then for the actual wave enemy kill itself, I decided to go for the deep blue strat. So, if you don't know, Deep Blue is basically we just shoot this big button on the platform here twice with a very particular timing, and that keeps the water up, which slows the enemy down. This loses time because it takes the wave enemy forever for it to get to you, but it does make the kill significantly easier because it's moving less quickly. I understand, by the way, that I'm talking a lot about safety strats in this speedrun, but I have died in more ways than you have ever imagined living. I wasn't about to risk throwing away a deathless dread mode run to save like 3 seconds. And like, hey, you know, it still looks scary, right? Boom! I shot him point blank. And plus, I think deep blue is kind of cool, honestly. I don't care if it's slow. You can take it from my cold, dead hands. And let me tell you, it's hard to kill me. That's a little joke about how this run is deathless. Please don't actually attack me in real life. I am a very small person. Emotionally, physically, spiritually. But not as a gamer. So, as we leave this arena, there is a little trick that you can do where you do a coyote jump off the sledge and then spin boost up the tunnel, but I messed it up, so the backup strat is to do a spin boost into the tunnel, then fall a little bit, and do a wall kick off of the very bottom so that you go directly into the tunnel and you get basically the full height of the wall jump. And then I messed up another speed keep. Not a great run for speed keeps, I gotta say. I messed up the one in Frozen Artaria, I messed up that one right there. Spoiler alert, I'm gonna mess up a couple in the last little stretch of this run, the last, 9 minutes. So, look forward to that. So you can see me in the player cam kind of trying to shake off my nerves, because this is the farthest I've ever gotten in a deathless attempt in pretty much any dread mode category. And, these last few fights, they're not particularly difficult, even without flash shift, at least not the red Chozo and the gold Chozo. But I lost a surprisingly large number of runs to the red Chozo and Hanubia. In theory, it's a pretty simple fight. You just hit him with Charlies and then beam spam whenever it lets its guard down. And you'll probably skip the shield counter. You can also use these storm missiles, obviously, to get a flurry of damage right at the start. Boom, boom, boom. And then I still have a couple missiles left, so I do a couple more when its shield is down. I'm always cooking the storm missiles, and then once I'm out of storm missiles, then it's just pure beam spam. And, same sort of idea as the Frozen Artaria Red Chozo, just whenever it spits up, you just do a little slide forward, and you can keep shooting it and not lose any DPS and not risk getting hit. So obviously this gives us power bombs. I guess I can just explain, if you don't know, a few things about how they work. If you lay a power bomb in one room and then cross over into the next room, the hitbox will affect both rooms. However, crossing a room while charging power bomb will reset the charge time. So it's not useful to hold charge between rooms, but I will be laying power bombs in the transition between rooms to get the power bomb to break stuff as quickly as possible. Another thing to mention is that the odds of getting power bomb ammo drops is significantly lower. I think it might even be 0 when you kill something with a power bomb. So I'm going to try and kill stuff with the wave beam between bombs to get some ammo. This section goes best if you have the ammo to do 4 power bombs, but 3 power bombs is okay too. Luckily I got the drops for 4 power bombs, so that's absolutely perfect. And then, so after you break these blocks, you're going to be doing a little speed keep. I think I messed it up, actually. Yeah, I stored here when I did not mean to. So laying the power bomb here, I don't have enough time to break that, to do the Shine Spark up the shaft. You can see I kind of had like a little optimistic moment where I was like, maybe it'll stay long enough. But no, there was absolutely no way. If I had flash shift, maybe, because I could have just like laid the power bomb and then flash shifted and then done a slow spark up. But without flash shift, there was absolutely no way. The Elite Chozo fight is theoretically about the same as the Red Chozo, but I can never seem to get the shield skip. Regardless, I do at least enough damage that after countering the shield, I can get the phase shift fairly soon after. And it's also kind of nice getting the missile refill, because it means that when the Chozo starts screaming, fun fact, it does not take damage while it's screaming, so you can just use that opportunity to charge the storm missiles, and then with that you get a little bit more damage and the fight goes just a little bit faster. I was actually a little bit worried that I slid in too early there, but luckily, as long as you're just holding forward, I actually think there is genuinely no way to die to the spit. So at this point, I was really shaking, honestly. It's like, okay, literally the only thing standing between me and a deathless, damageless, minimum items, dread mode run is Beak. Coincidentally, Beak is the hardest fight in the game in minimum items, and it's not even remotely close. Every single attack he has a chance of killing you. I mean, it does kill you if it touches you, obviously, but like, he has attack patterns that are much more difficult to avoid than any other boss. He's a much longer boss than any other fight in the game. And, like, there's this one particular attack that you'll see what I'm talking about when I get there, but there's this one particular attack that just requires such precise positioning. And you can also see I messed up this little speed keep there. Normally what I want to do is I want to jump through that door after like shooting downwards, and that lets me take the power bomb charge into the next room, but I did not do that properly, so I ended up wasting a little bit of time going into Beak. So for phase 1 of the Beak fight, just to start explaining, I want to do enough damage to trigger a scripted counter. So that's missiles and cross bombs. It takes 6 missiles and a lot of time to break the black ball without ice. So I just use power bomb to just destroy the stupid thing in phase 1. And so that's the shitty thing about super missiles. But once we get the scripted counter, we can use the super missiles to skip the part of the phase where he has golden armor, because the game only reduces damage during counter cutscenes for wave beam and ice missiles during phase 1. And so you saw that I ran under Beak at the start of phase 2. This was to manipulate him so that if he starts with the beam burst attack, you don't take any damage. Beam burst is like the name of the game in phase 2. When he does the hyper beam, I want to position myself under the middle of his wings, or just a little bit past where the beam hits the ground. When he crashes into a wall, I want to be in the dead center of the room, and when he crashes into the ground, I want to be a little bit past the tip of his wings. All of these positionings are to manipulate the spacing and angle of the beam burst attack. Because we want to do a dash melee aim to be able to avoid damage and fight back during this attack, but if you don't manipulate where Beak fires from, you will often take 1 or 2 ticks of glancing blows at the start of the attack. Now, even in low percent, those ticks won't usually kill you, but in dread mode, obviously we don't have that luxury. And then phase 3 is basically the same thing as the first phase, but with a few extra attacks and a lot more health. We always take the counter cutscene because there's not really any damage reduction during it, and allows us to do consistent damage, unlike every other part of it where we have to do all these other manipulations where, you saw that I was jumping over him to make sure that he fired up so that I could keep attacking, but like, jumping up is time that I'm not doing damage to him, and obviously there's a few points during the counter cutscene where you're not doing damage either, but all in all, it's a nice, consistent little stream of damage. I am a little bit scared here when I only have 1 power bomb, because it means that if he throws 2 yellow suns, then I'm just screwed. But I heard that the music was hitting that like little resonance note there, which means that the fight is almost over, assuming I've been doing semi-optimal damage, which it seemed like I had been, so the fight ended pretty quickly. And you can see that I was popping off there in the corner. I was in a Discord call with some friends from the Metroid Dread speedrunning Discord, and that was really fun to get this run with with friends watching, and just people cheering me on and congratulating me when I hit that final counter on Beak, because like there's no real way to lose. There's no real way to die during the escape. You can lose time for sure. It's a very movement heavy, like, minute and a half of the game, but I was 30 seconds ahead of my personal best at this point, so I knew that even if I had a little bit sloppy movement, I was still definitely going to get the personal best and, by extension, the world record. And obviously this was going to still be hitless, because you would have to actually drop this controller and not know where to find it to pick it up to die during escape for time reasons. So I felt very confident at this point that like this was the run. It was just kind of the victory lap. When I screamed and popped off after countering Beak, my wife came over to so she's just like slightly off camera in the the face cam, and she was saying, like, what the hell happened, because she knew that I'd been grinding this category, and she had also been encouraging me when I had been grinding low percent hard mode last year, and she was actually really supportive during that time, and she's been really supportive during this time as well, encouraging me to take breaks when needed, and just making sure that I'm not overextending myself so I don't burn out, which I really want to thank her for, because if it weren't for that, then I definitely would not have been able to get this run. I would have burned out a very, very long time ago. But a 1:24:23. What a time. Not to get too sappy about it, but I'd like to say that this is a accomplishment that I feel really, really good and satisfied for getting. When I was just like a little kid, before YouTube even came out, I would like look on Google Video for like videos about video games, and I found speedrunning, and I always thought that was so fascinating, and because it's like a way to turn like any game into like a really high level challenge, basically. And so I always thought that was interesting, and when I looked more into it, I looked at, the basic categories were 100%, any percent, and low percent. And to me, low percent always seemed like the most interesting, because like when you play through a game casually, you're typically doing either any percent or 100% just kind of by default. You don't usually do low percent, so it's kind of like an interesting way to play the game, even ignoring the speed aspect. But of course, the speed aspect adds another layer of challenge to it, because it's like, I firmly believe that anybody, if they didn't care about the time aspect, they could finish a minimum items run. They might die quite a few times, but they could finish it for sure. The tricks aren't that difficult to skip the items, even on the lower difficulties where you have to do the really hard damage boosts to skip ice missiles and spin boost, and then obviously do the latter half of the game with worse movement and worse damage. That's a quite difficult speedrun. But if you were just doing it as a casual route, like, yeah, if you can finish Metroid Dread at all, then you could probably finish that route. The speed aspect makes it just kind of like adds a little bit more pressure. Like, okay, well, can you do it well? Can you master that route? And that's really interesting to me. And that's why I like low percent. I think any further thoughts that I have on the speedrun can be inferred by its mere existence, so I will end the commentary here. I hope you guys enjoy the remainder of the credits music, and I will see you next mission.